Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to our first You Matter Here live stream. I am Dr. Sarah Fedirka. I am the director of the Watterson Center for Ethical Leadership, and we're really glad you're joining this conversation with us. It's my privilege today to have a conversation with Dr. Wesley Sutermeister, Assistant Professor of Religious Studies, and Dr. Stephen Wild, newly promoted Associate Professor of Physics. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's so awesome. Yeah, great. We are going to be talking today about matter and mattering. This spring, the Watterson Center for Ethical Leadership has taken a campus initiative on mattering. We are doing a campus read of Jennifer Wallace's book, Mattering. In her book, Wallace offers the premise that mattering is something of an equation. She says, right, like in order to feel mattered, you need to both feel valued and have the opportunity to contribute or to give value. So we're going to explore some of that today. Wallace goes on to say, which I think is interesting and connects what we do. She says that, mattering is the story that we tell ourselves about our place in the world. And so as a literary scholar, that's something that I deal with all the time, stories, narrative. But then it occurs to me that in religious studies, there's narrative. In physics, there are theories, there are ways of thinking about the world and how we live in the world. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we all got together and had a conversation and, hopefully people will learn something. My hope is that during our time together, we are able to just sort of enjoy each other's company and to think through some of the ways that we talk about matter in our disciplines, both in terms of what matter means in your fields, but also to think through like what mattering means, how things come to have meaning or value, because I think that there is a lot of overlap in what we do. So before we get to our first question, I would like to give a shout out to Leanne Ireland, who is our Director of Alumni Relations, who is my sort of partner in crime with this, and to Jason Geiser and the UFTV crew who are here and helping us make all this happen. So thanks everybody. It truly takes a team. All right, so then let's start with our first question here. It's not a surprising one. So in your discipline, would you just talk me through like how your discipline defines the concept of matter, right? So in literary studies, just to give you an idea, we talk about works having value or a text having matter, and those things are sort of defined by the canon or by literary scholars of past years who say, these works by Shakespeare, they have matter or have value, right? Like we're in front of a whole set of books that someone has decided have matter based on their style or their narrative or the way they build character. So we have a set of values that we assign to literary works. So Wes, I'm looking at you first. Would you just talk us through in religious studies like what matter or mattering mean?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on. I do think that it's an interesting question in terms of religious studies because what we get to do is explore how people throughout history in the world today have looked at and understood matter in terms of reality, and what is the source of matter, the source of that reality. What are its origins? Does it come from some transcendent source like God or gods, or what is the story that's told about reality and our place here? So I think that's what is really fascinating about religious studies. We explore all these stories that we'll probably talk about later. Where does this reality come from? Where does matter come from? And when we can identify the source of matter, then maybe we can figure out what is its destination, like where is it going, and then what is our role as human beings, as communities, in kind of guiding matter or guiding reality to unfold its full potential. And so there's a lot of different takes depending on where you're looking in the world, what cultures, who are telling the story about matter. But I think fundamentally it has to do with what's the source of reality, what's its basis, and then what's its goal? Like what is it tending toward, or who is it tending toward? Right. If that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because I think about, where you're saying about where does matter come from. Again, like thinking about literature, we write matter into existence with language, right? I mean, we create worlds. So then what's the origin story? And we will talk about that a little bit. So no, I appreciate that. And physics has a different understanding of matter and where matter comes from. So Steve, tell us about that.
Okay, so I think one of the differences between like physics and philosophy is we try to come up with a way to measure and quantify and then write some equations that tell us how we understand the world around us. So physics is doing the same processes as religion, but they approach it from a mathematical standpoint and a measurable standpoint. So for us, we have a definition of matter, and then it just depends on what theory you want to use to say what matter is. But our goal is still the same thing. Why do we have matter? Where does it come from? And our understanding of that has changed as our ability to measure the world around us changes. So for us, matter is something. Bang. So for us, matter is something that has mass and takes up space,
Right.
and that's what matter is. Now you go to a different theory, and your definition of matter slightly changes. You say, oh, if I go to like quantum mechanics, if I go really small, I have fields, and the fields, you excite a field, and then that's where matter is. And then you can say, oh, I put subatomic particles together, and what holds, you can keep digging down. And then eventually you still have to say, well, where does that come from? Right. And so we're always trying to get to the next step to understand matter and where it comes from and why, and we have a limitation too on our understanding of that.
Sure, in terms of, that no one field is claiming to have a lock on understanding where matter comes from and what its purpose is and where it's going. That we try to figure that out, well, ideally together, right? I mean, but sometimes in our own disciplines.
Right.
It seems that maybe one of the fundamental differences is that in religious talk is primarily done through storytelling.
Yeah.
So can we get at reality and what matters through story, physics, mathematics, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's what's kind of interesting is that maybe they don't have to be seen as competing kind of ways of getting after matter or reality, but can be seen as complementary.
Yeah.
Doing different things, getting after what is all this?
Right. So now I'm going to ask a question about the math part of it. So are the mathematical, and this is going to show my complete ignorance of physics, but so could you make the argument that the math and the equation is just, or the theorems or the theories are just another version of story? Is that storytelling in numbers or no? You're like, Sarah, that is completely off the mark. Stay in your lane.
In some ways, yes.
Okay.
So when we make observations of the world and how things change in time, our equations can tell us how things are the way we observe them now based on evidence. And then the other part is we can try and make predictions about where things will be in the future as well.
Right.
So we can, for example, you launch a rocket, and as long as you know what the things are happening to the rocket, we can tell you that rocket will be here at some point in the future, right? Or we say, oh, we see this coming from here, we can tell you where it came from in the past. So it tells a story, but slightly differently.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And we can roll back only so far. We can go back pretty far, and our equations and theories can tell us pretty far back to the start almost.
Yeah, right, because I'm going to use your rocket analogy, and they may be like, you are not allowed to talk to her anymore, but right, because that, literally the arc of here's where the rocket is starting from, and here's now its trajectory. I mean, in some ways, in literary studies, we would talk about that as a narrative arc. We know where it started, and then here's a thing, and we know where it's going, and then there's going to be a conclusion. Right. Which in some ways are similar to origin stories in religious studies. Here was a starting point, and now here is the arc of how we got from that starting point to how we got here into the present and where we could be going. into the future.
Yeah, there's like predictability to the mathematical models and the
Right.
physics, whereas when we're talking about origin stories from religious traditions, say like the book of Genesis, it starts off with the creator's freedom.
Right.
So it brings in almost the moral, ethical sense of freedom of creation, and then decision making and choices become so much involved with how we make a world and how creation happens through words, through
Yeah.
discourse, through
Yeah.
dialogue, through partnership, through learning. And so I think it's interesting that the creation stories already bring in a kind of a fundamental, like creation's not locked in, or the arc of the story is not
Right,
locked
sure.
in. You cannot really predict what's going to happen with human choices. You can't really predict what might happen with the potentialities of life inherent in nature. So there is this dynamic element that's almost like built into reality, if that makes any sense. I'm actually working right now on this German theologian, Karl Rahner, talks about matter as frozen spirit. So thinking about matter as frozen spirit, meaning it has an inherent potentiality there, but it needs to kind of reach a certain level of complexity before that dynamism can be unleashed into all sorts of kinds of life. And who could have predicted all these diverse forms of life and that we have now? So, but yeah, religious stories of creation and matter generally have that element of moral freedom, and there's some unpredictability there. There's some risk there, and that you cannot really capture that in the same way that you can with.
But I was going to say at the same time, there are parts of physics where things are not known, and that really bugs. So you know, when quantum theory came about, and then everything became a probability, not a until you take the measurement, it had a percentage chance of being or doing something. And that was when Einstein makes the famous quote. He didn't like that, and so he said, God doesn't play dice with the universe.
Right,
But
yeah.
it turns out he did. So because quantum theory is is a probability theory. And so, you know, so there is that weirdness. Or you think about, you know, we have chaos theory because weather is chaotic, right? What at best you can predict the weather a small fraction ahead. So, you know, like I said, there's limitations, but our math does the best to describe it, right? So you can't certain things are chaotic and you don't know where they will go, much like your stories.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the human that is the most chaotic element of all, the
Yeah.
human.
Yeah,
freedom.
absolutely. Well, then let's talk about that a minute, because it seems like part of the way I understand the world is trying to make order out of things that are chaotic, right? And while I don't particularly understand entropy, I'm fascinated by entropy. And so there too, in literary terms, if you think, if you have read things like William Butler Yeats's The Second Coming, which says, you know, things fall apart, the center cannot hold, or Thomas Pynchon has a short story that is literally entitled Entropy, or in The Crying of Lot 49, entropy is one of the key themes where humanity, as it loses, okay, now you're going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about. So let me see, right? As you move towards heat death and things start to become more chaotic, right? And so then for some of these writers, then it's human relationships that sort of help restore that. And with religious studies, in so many religious traditions, it seems like there is a sense of decline or fall, and there needs to be some kind of restoration or a return to order. So, would you, now I'll start with you, Steve, would you talk say more about chaos and that kind of sense of physics?
Okay, so in terms of entropy, entropy is the idea that disorder always has to increase. So
that is my life.
And so the only way to order something. So, for example, life on Earth is very ordered. Like a chair is a very structured, ordered thing, right? And so to make a chair, somebody had to spend a lot of energy to put a chair together to make a chair it's a very ordered, structured thing. Or even simpler, you can think about ice. You take water, you put it in the freezer, and then it becomes crystal, and that's a very structured thing compared to regular loose water. And to do that, you have to drive energy into your fridge to make the ice.
Yeah.
So in order to bring order, there's always an expenditure to order things. Otherwise, things want to cause more disorder. And disorder that's why things like to go to disorder. It's just what nature prefers, is disorder. It prefers to access more chaos, essentially, or disorder versus order. And order is only provided when you when you push it to order versus allowing it. On its own, it will continue to get disordered. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me, right? Like you have to put energy in. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was saying, and that's actually one of the arguments that some, the leading physicist theories are that's how we know which way time goes. Time pushes in the direction of disorder versus that's how we know where hey, this is why we know time is moving this way because
order is behind us.
Yeah, and we go to a more state of disorder.
Interesting. Okay, so all right, so now that's really helpful for me. And again, I'm always thinking about it in literary terms, in sort of once the story is written and the energy has been put in, the creative energy, the time energy, the time it would take for me to have a lot of snacks while I'm writing, all of that energy has been expended,
yes.
And then there is the order of a narrative. But in the process of getting to the narrative, there is disorder, right? I mean, if you see all the drafts and all of the versions of things, there is chaos in my mind and on paper or on my laptop until the written story has been completed, and then I have made things in order. And that also then speaks to your point about time, because the time has passed from disorder to order.
Yes, but you put a lot of energy into
order. That is
order.
correct. I put a lot of energy into that order. Oh, yeah, that's really helpful. So then in thinking about chaos and disorder in religious studies...
Yeah. It's wild, because some of the oldest creation stories that we have as human beings, like the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, chaos is embodied as this angry goddess of saltwater chaos, Tiamat, who does battle with Marduk, who is basically the one that the divine assembly calls on to be its champion and go defeat the forces of chaos, and which is kind of the ocean and the sea for the ancient peoples. And so Marduk has to do battle against Tiamat and her evil demon armies. There's even a hairy buffalo monster, but it is this taming of the chaos beast and defeating it. And then once you've kind of controlled and tamed the beast and defeated this monster, we can use her carcass to make the cosmos, the world. And that's just one of those kind of origin stories that you can see that the creators of the authors of the Genesis accounts are kind of responding to, where Jews and Christians, of course, Genesis 1, God creates in an effortless manner with the word, but it says in the beginning there was this watery abyss, darkness, this tofu, abohu, in my Hebrew's right there, where it's this kind of watery deep.
Right.
And then God creates primarily by separating with words and creating this space or this bubble where life can happen. And so it is about ordering the chaos. But it's interesting in Genesis how the human being and all the creatures are kind of put in their proper places, and then they're almost called on to serve as little vice regents of God, to have dominion, to help order the chaos. And so for ancient people, that chaos was always there, right around the corner, threatening to break into human society, human life at any time. And so what's going to be the force that can that we can use to hold chaos at bay?
Right.
And sometimes that turned into, well, we can use military force. We're going to be a great empire. We're going to just dominate, and that's how we're going to keep security for ourselves. And that didn't really work for ancient Israelites.
Right.
The ancestors of Jewish people in history. It was we're gonna have to use words. Words can be creative too. So, yeah, it's fascinating to read how chaos has such a concern for people who lived really precarious existences. So,
Sure. You know,
Yeah.
I'm struck by what you said about how in Genesis, right, order is created by separating things. I mean, and I don't know if there's an equivalent of that in physics, but I'm just thinking in reality, so often we try to create order by categorizing, by separating, by relying on binaries or on ways of, creating order out of separation, because so often when things are put into relation, then that's when, I'm just thinking now about human beings, right? You know, you put human beings into relation, it can be chaos, which is at times overwhelming or scary. So then it seems like our tendency is to separate. Is that, I mean, are you like, yeah, that has no business in physics at all? Or is there any principles of like separation, or in physics do things like work towards relational kinds of things? I don't even know how to ask that question.
bonds, gluons. No.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you know, so let's say you want to, if you have a gas, let's say you have like oxygen and nitrogen. If they were just sitting in the air right now, it would be you'd have to spend a lot of energy to like separate the two. On their own, they will just naturally mix. They just naturally mix around. They don't bind, but they will just mix on their own. That's because that improves entropy when they can mix versus separate. Now, to bind things together, that's expensive. To bind things together, that takes a lot of energy to overcome binding barriers, which is what the sun does, right? The sun takes 2 hydrogen, well, actually it takes 4 hydrogens through a process and makes a helium. And
I nodded like I knew what you were talking about.
yeah. No, that's how the sun makes light and energy.
Okay.
It takes 4 hydrogens, fuses, and makes the next element. It makes a helium. And in that process, though, when it fuses, even though you have to overcome this huge energy barrier, when it does that, it releases a little bit of energy as light, because the mass of 4 hydrogens as a helium is lower than 4 individual hydrogens.
Okay.
But yes, it's a very expensive process to do. We can do it here on the Earth, but not as efficiently as the sun.
Sure. Right.
So, but yeah, so there are barriers, and things don't want to. That's a hard thing to do, is put things together at the atomic level.
Right.
But otherwise, like, we know how to put things together, like, in other ways, right?
Yeah. Well, even at the human level, it's expensive to put things together, right? I
Sure.
mean, it seems like often it's easier to just keep things separated, but it is costly. But then it seems more valuable, right? Because what you're
Right.
saying then is that there is a byproduct that is energy or light, and that is meaningful and worth the experience of it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so then talking about light makes me think about sort of things being seen and unseen, right? And so if I think of matter, I think of, you know, myself as having physical matter, or I really loved your example of the chair, right? Like the chair has matter. It took my brain a while to be like, yep, and the chair is made up of atoms, so they're all moving, but it still has matter, right? Like it's solid, we can sit on it, and you're
Right.
not going to fall on the floor. But at the same time, there are lots of things that are unseen. So then, like in literary studies, those things still would have matter, right? Like a third-person omniscient narrator who's part of the story, but you never see them, but they really kind of control or shape the narrative. That gives matter to the narrative, and they have an important part in it, but you don't see them. They're not a character, so they don't matter as a character. So could you talk through ideas of what is seen and unseen, right? So I'm thinking like religious studies, the idea of spirit or of soul, or of, when I think about my Nicene Creed, the creation of the seen and the unseen. And in physics, it seems like there's matter and there's, I'll go out on a limb here, antimatter.
Well, yeah, antimatter does
matter.
exist. There's dark matter. And then, so in terms of physics, there are things that you can think about when we talk about when we introduce forces. The idea like, oh, you push on something and it causes it to move. And there are forces that cause things to move that aren't what we call direct contact.
Oh, say more.
So
Please.
like, for example, you can attach a rope and drag the chair.
Yeah.
And that's you pulling on something. Or you, like, you know, the ground is supporting the chairs, right? So that's but one force that you don't see, but you see the effect of, is gravity.
Oh, sure.
Because you drop something and it falls to the ground, but you didn't see a hand reach up and like pull it down. Or the one favorite one kids love is magnets.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you can put like a little magnet and stick them on your hand and watch them move around.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there are forces that you can see and not see.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you know, you just mentioned like dark matter. Dark matter is something we observe the effects of, but we don't know what it causes it, but we know we see the effects of it and we know it has to be there.
Which makes sense, because, right, we don't see it immediately, but we would be very aware if there were no gravity. Or
Right.
when you do fun things with magnets, then you are very aware of that force.
Right.
Yeah, that makes good sense. So then what's the equivalent in terms of the seen and the unseen and in religious studies?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about soul and spirit, but honestly, in terms of mattering, I was thinking of the idea of glory.
Oh.
In Hebrew, it's kavod, which actually is weightiness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, isn't that perfect,
If something
right?
is like glorious, it's got a lot of weight.
To it.
And so obviously like God's glory, right? But human beings in the image and likeness of God, there is some certain like heaviness and weightiness to the human being in their presence. And that should cause us to have a little bit of like pause whenever we encounter other people and in terms of our behaviors and actions towards other people. Like there is some weightiness to the human being and to all of creation, really.
Right.
And so that the weight of glory, which was the title of a C.S. Lewis book, who kind of used that image of kavod and weightiness, glory, that we should be struck by this weightiness in every human being, and that should cause us to, how should I treat them? I probably shouldn't just like do violence to them, use them, manipulate them, abuse them. And so there are these ethical consequences that will come out of this idea of, yeah, there's something glorious about a human being, weighty, heavy. And yeah, I just think that that's a great way to think about it. And in some of the Bible stories, some people might be familiar with, like when Pharaoh's army is drowned in the Red Sea, you know, following Moses in the Exodus story, we're actually told that his horses and chariots they've got too much weight, and that's why they get stuck in the mud. So it's almost like Pharaoh's glory, his own like pride and pompousness. He thought he was really more than he was, and that other people didn't matter as much, and that they could be kind of used, abused, enslaved. And so there's social aspects to glory and how we kind of parse out in society, like these people seem to matter more than others, but we all know, like, no, everybody should be equally treated with their equal glory. So there's all of those considerations too.
Yeah, I didn't know about the weightiness piece or the weightedness piece with the idea of glory, which I think is really brilliant. And the idea too, like you mentioned with Pharaoh, that we can become so weighted down by our own sense of matter, right? By our own sense of importance, and then, right, if we're not careful, we're going to get stuck, literally stuck. And in that story, right, you're going to drown because you think that some bodies, as you say, have more matter or matter more than other bodies, which is also a thread through literary studies and disability studies, right? The idea of bodies. Judith Butler is a theorist who literally wrote a book called Bodies That Matter. And the idea, to your point about the social piece of it, that we value some physical bodies more than other bodies. Like, so in physics, how does the idea of body, like I think of the body of the stars or the body of the universe or the body of the heavens, so it's like, can you help me think through like how things are embodied in physics, like how they take physical form, or how you talk about bodies and bodies having that value or matter.
Okay, so I think if we want to go large, what causes things to be there in let's say in astrophysics is gravity. So in gravity is one of the weird things that it always is an attractive thing. So all mass will clump to other mass. Now, on Earth, it's harder to notice that because like friction will prevent things from moving, but out in space, you don't have that. So over time, things clump and start sticking and growing in size. And so granted, you need large amounts of dust and gas to make, let's say, a star or a planet, but that's the whole point is in space, gravity will start sticking things together, and once they start sticking, more things start, it clumps. And so you can make a star that way. Now you need an obscene amount of mass to make a star and a planet and things like that. But what's interesting is when you have those, what Einstein realized was that it's a structure that's there called space-time, and the idea is that mass bends it, and it causes like dips and dents in it, and then and that tells other mass how to move around in the space-time. And so that's why, let's say the sun puts a big dent in it and the earth is like circling in a bowl, around the edge of a bowl, because of the dent that the sun creates. And that dent in the space-time is what all the planets run around in. So that's one of those things, is mass bends space-time and tells matter how to move, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Should be a T-shirt. It clumps.
It clumps. Yeah, it does.
That's what it does. Just clumps.
It all clumps together.
It's called accretion.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and even in that moment, then there's a weightiness to it. I mean, the bigger the thing, I'm going to assume, the more it's going to bend space-time,
Yes,
and then it's going to maybe have more. Right, our sun, it seems, according to the people who are in those fields, matters more than, let's just take Pluto, where I know some people were very displeased when Pluto got downgraded. And people were like, oh no, but Pluto still matters. Right. But people were like, no, Pluto is not a planet, right? I mean, I know I'm digressing. Right. But in some ways, then it seems like that sense of importance. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
It just seems like that sense of importance, or kind of what do we then matter? Do we measure matter by contribution or sense of importance, or I'm not sure how to actually say this, but like how then in your fields, because you were talking about measuring matter, and the same thing with religious studies, like how then do we measure what matters or determine what matters? And you're silent. You're like, we don't even know what she's asking. That's what I get from my students.
I have an idea. Go ahead if you...
Well, I was just saying it probably would go towards something like the inherent dignity of people, because they have a transcendent source.
Yeah.
Or like a transcendent referent. But yeah, the inherent dignity of the human being, how would you measure it though? I think most of the times in religious traditions, through deeds, right? Good ethical actions, activities, but there is, even before any kind of activities on that individual does, there's some inherent dignity there.
Right.
But yeah, what are we gonna say? I'll pass it over to you.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I think in science, that's where the scientific method comes in.
Okay.
So they use that scientific method of, hey, we can weed out the bad science from what we think is good science. And the whole point of that is, even if you had good science today, 100 years from now, they could look back and say, oh, they had no idea what they were talking about, right? And so that enables us to constantly say, oh, this is the science that matters, right, is the theory that is currently the data is supporting.
Right.
So I would think that's how we would value, and what's for the better the theory, the more it matters, right?
Sure.
The more elegant the theory,
Yeah.
the more it matters.
Right. Sure. No, that makes sense. I was thinking of all the ways that theories are applied to literary studies, and
Okay.
so if you can apply a particular, they come into vogue, right? For right now, it's going to be this theory, and where everybody's going to, be a formalist, or everybody's going to read according to the Lacan or whatever it is. So the idea of having, I know it's not exactly the same thing, but it's a way of interpreting, right? Or trying to measure or figure out what matters by applying a theory to understand, again, our place in the world, or our sense of story, or whatever it is.
It could even be like simple measurements of like the common good.
Yeah.
But these are, again, like kind of ethical considerations, which I think a lot of religious talk and discourse and stories want to go that direction. Or like the life imperative, where does it contribute to the flourishing of human life, but also the life of all creatures as well? That should be a kind of a moral test of whether something is good or not. And so I do think in terms of mattering, in religious studies, like the ethical considerations come in almost immediately, and that even in rituals,
Right.
or in the myths and the stories, the ethical considerations are almost there up front, because it's the human reality is up front and center, first and foremost, which has like physical implications, I
Right.
guess we could say.
Yeah.
So biological life is important. But then when we look at human life, we're more than just the biological life. We talk about life as a quality, the fullness of life, which would include spiritual values such as freedom and goodness and truth and beauty, those transcendentals. And we would say that we want to provide and maximize the space where all people can flourish in terms of maximizing those potentials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just smiling because truth.
Spitballing.
No, you're right on. Truth and beauty and truth, right? Like that's from romantic poetry too. That idea that capital T, truth, and capital B, beauty. That those are the things that matter, and that they have an ethical component to them, right? It's not just here's a pretty picture, or here's something that it's the picturesque as opposed to the sublime in some ways, but right, like there's an ethical sense to that. So sort of out of left field, like beyond sort of good science and bad science, is there an underlying sense of ethics in physics? And again, people may be like, Steve, you can never talk to her again. Like she doesn't get physics at all. But like, is there any ethical component?
So I would say that in science, scientists should be yes, you should be ethical, right? That's one of those tenets that a good scientist is ethical. If the data doesn't support the theory, you're supposed to reject the theory or change the theory and then retest it. And if ethically, sometimes somebody could be offered money to fudge data, look the other way, cherry pick data. So yeah, I mean, those things happen when you're talking about money.
Right.
Money clouds the ethical issue.
That's a polite way to say that. Money clouds the issue.
It clouds the issue, and sometimes that causes people to maybe publish a bad paper,
right?
And then what takes time is, the scientific method. If someone says, "Well, I'm going to tech that," so they read someone's paper and said, "Well, is that true?" And then they have to spend the effort to recreate the experiment, and then it could take years before they say, "Wait a minute, we couldn't," multiple labs tried to reproduce this and they couldn't, and then they say, "We think this is bad," and they redact it. And what they hope is they can find that before people latch on to it.
Right.
But yes, that there is, I think, with money seems to cloud issues, even in science. Like, even though scientists want to talk about they're above this or they're, I think you see that, you can see that back in even history with the classic example, let's say out of something like Cosmos, the TV show, when he talks about leaded gas.
That's Carl Sagan.
Well,
right?
this
Yeah.
is when they redid it.
Okay.
They redid it with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, yeah.
And in that, he talks about how in the leaded gas, and you know, car companies were claiming, oh, the leaded gas doesn't harm anybody,
Right.
you know, and they had their data, and then someone said, no, we can see that this leaded gas is, you know, you just don't notice it. And so, you know, someone was being paid a lot of money to kind of cloud the issue and make it a little murkier. And I think that happens. So
Yeah.
yes, it's a shame that, you know, scientists can't all be ethical people.
Right. Yeah, right. Anybody in any field,
Right.
you can't
Right.
be ethical people.
But I think that's part of the problem is people they want to view science as some kind of altruistic, almost God that, you know, is impartial or whatever, but it's still created, like science is people made, right? And it can refine itself, but I think people look to it almost in the wrong way.
But the ideal is like we're getting after truth here, right?
Right.
And so there is
Yeah.
this commitment to truth that spurs curiosity and draws
Right.
us on to search and explore and discover.
Right.
Yeah. So I
But-
think that's common to like
Right.
all sorts of disciplines.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
hope, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
Oh, and that's the good part of science is it is looking for a truth, like that mathematical
Right.
proof that can,
Mhm.
oh look, we can describe everything with one equation, kind of.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people
Well,
are still doing the activity.
And even in literary studies, the idea that you can use fiction to get at truth, right? I mean, that seems ironical or paradoxical that you are using a fiction, sort of what would seemingly be a falsehood, but it's not. It's not false. It's not a lie. It is a fiction. It is a creative something, but to get at a truth. So yes, I would agree that all of the disciplines, in their own ways, are trying to get at a
Right.
truth. Sort of being aware of our time, I'm going to shift us gears a minute, and I'm going to keep us focused on truth. And before you came in here, I asked you both to be thinking about someone who's in your corner, right? So one of the arguments that Wallace makes is the idea that in order to really feel like we matter, and then to also have the opportunity to create, like to add value, right? We feel valued and then we can add value, is that we need people who have invested in our lives, right? We need the people who are, she uses the boxing term, like a corner man or a corner person. So I asked you both to think about who that person has been for you. I mean, I will just say, in fairness, since I will ask you to answer the question, I'll answer the question. One of the people who did that for me was my thesis director, who then went on to be one of the co-chairs of my dissertation. And she was an encourager. She was a supporter. She saw potential in me when I really didn't see any potential. But she was also the person who was like, what are you thinking? Or, right, no, this doesn't work. Or go back and do it again. And there were times where she would read a draft and I would just sort of be in tears. I was like, oh my gosh. But then years later, I thought, wow, you took the time to invest in me in a way that I recognize now, especially as a teacher. Like, you really made me feel like I mattered in a way that now I hope I can pay forward to my students. So, Wes, I'm starting with you. Who's your corner person?
Well, you know, my wife, always doing stuff behind the scenes and giving me opportunities to come here and talk to you all. No, for real, it's kind of like cliche, but like if you don't have like family members and a support system, I don't think I could study. I couldn't have gone through those years of grad school. So really feeling like you matter. It comes from the people close to you. So I'm kind of going to cop out on that and
That's
just.
not a cop out. I'll push. Like, does she hold you accountable? Like, in addition to supporting
you know,
you, is she
it's
also like,
we have
oh,
this
Wes,
we have
Wes,
this joke
Wes.
where we're like, whenever we answer deep, serious questions, we're like disclaimer, like family, like God, okay, like yeah, Jesus, okay, but but you're right. I mean, it is the people that invest in you and see that what you're doing has a unique contribution. And I do hope that like everybody has that person that's like, yeah, I appreciate you as a human being. Like you have some inherent dignity that everybody has. But I think there's something that people want to be recognized for their unique gifts
Yeah.
and contributions and skills that they've kind of developed over time. So that's just
No,
where I go with
I
that.
appreciate what you're saying, that it's one thing to be recognized because you're a human being and you have dignity and value as a human being, and you should be treated with dignity and be valued because you are a human being. But at the same time, we all have our own unique attributes.
Quirkiness or whatever.
Yeah, quirkiness.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And those are the things that we would hope that people would recognize us, recognize in us, or value in us. But to get there, we have to be vulnerable enough to let people see those things. And I don't know that we are always maybe so willing. I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for you all, but I'm not always willing to. Although my quirkiness is hard to hide, so there's that piece. But okay, no, I appreciate that. Shout out to your wife. Yay.
There it is. Shout out.
Yeah. All right, Steve, what do you got?
Oh, that was a tough one, because I always think about at different stages.
Oh yeah, sure. They're not always the same person.
It's not always the same person. And then even at some stages, there's been multiple people in my. It's not like one, but
Right.
I don't know. I was like, wow, this person was here and this person was there, and like my wife was the same way. If she wasn't supporting me when I was in grad school, I wouldn't have been able to finish either. And I was just sitting there thinking about all these different people. When I was out working, my boss John, he supported me. He would let me take off a few days of work to go get training or something, to grow as a person. Or I had friends when I was in grad school that would like, hey, you got to keep up, do this, stay with that. Even now, like my chair Nate, he pushes me, to try. It's annoying sometimes, but. It's he means he wants the best, right? And you need that person to sharpen you, So I don't know. I was thinking of all these different people throughout, my mom and dad. Like when I'm growing up, you think, oh, this is terrible, but in the reality, it's you appreciate it more later when you can look back. In the moment, it's not like, boy, I'm glad this is happening.
Right, sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. When you have your own kids and you have to call your mom and be like, I understand why we were never allowed to play with Play-Doh in the carpeted living room, right? So, I know that's not what you're talking about. But
Well, but
that's a real thing.
It is a real thing.
That is totally a real thing. But no, agreed, right? You have to have the person who both is supportive to you,
Right.
but also is willing to challenge you, to be like, I know
Right.
you can do better, or I'm going to hold you to a higher standard because I know what you're capable of, or I see the potential of these capabilities. Like, you may not be quite there yet, but I'm going to use the word investing because that's what Wallace uses, but I'm going to invest in you in a way that shows that you really, really matter. So, yeah. That's awesome. I have so much enjoyed our conversation, and I could just kind of keep talking to you forever, but no, we'll wrap it up so your wife doesn't have to be like, Wes, you can't talk to her either. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope that you have been challenged and intrigued by the ways that we've been able to talk about matter and mattering in our various disciplines. And one of the things that I think is so relevant and something that we lose sight of so easily is that the disciplines have so many areas of overlap and interconnection, and sometimes it's so easy to be so siloed in what it is that you do. But it seems like in trying to understand what mattering is, and to make things, to give value or to understand sort of about matter, we have to be willing to bring them to light and to actually see them, right? We have to see people, we have to be able to see things. And to recognize that even when we can't see a thing, that doesn't mean that it's not there, right? So we have to see in a different way or a different kinds of perspective, which I think challenges us. But then that also brings the sense of connection in terms of relationships, right? We also have talked about sort of the idea of relationships and how important relations are to us, and the idea that they contribute to our sense of healthy relationships, contribute to our sense of well-being and to feeling mattered. So great. Thank you both so very much. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you're interested in participating in the You Matter Here, Join the Conversation initiative through the Watterson Center, you're welcome to read the book. We have them on reserve at Schaefer Library. But you're also welcome to just join any of the lunches or conversations. We'll have another live stream coming up next month. So thanks so much, and we really appreciate your time.